Now let's look at what are the legal structures of the social businesses. And as you can see on the screen, there are broadly three kinds of structures which emerge at different points in time. The first is trust, which is a structure which emerged about 150 years back when India was still a colony. It allowed for philanthropic people to do social work. So we'll see more about it later on. Around the same time, societies also emerged as a legal structure. And then when the India company laws were formulated, there's a special section which was called Section 25 earlier and now called Section 8, which provided for social businesses to be set up under the ambit of the law. So way back in the 1880s, the trust law was set up to enable philanthropists and social workers to work for social good. And that structure is still allowed today. And a few trustees, do-gooders, people who want to work for society, people who are philanthropists, people who are committed to a social cause, can form a trust and continue their social mission. So if some of you, 3, 4, 5, 10, some of you want to set up a trust to do social good, you can do so. Many hospitals, many schools are set up to be trust. Many of the old schools and the hospitals are set up as trusts and is run by trustees. So if you are studying in a school or college, you may want to check back on whether your school or college is run by a trust. If you see a hospital, an old hospital, as you pass by, you may want to check whether that hospital is run by a trust. So these are called trusts set up under the Trust Act. We now come to societies which are also set up as a Societies Act about 150 years back. And it allowed people to come together to do various activities. It could be education, it could be research, it could be expeditions. So things like the Asiatic Society was set up. Many schools are set up by societies. Today, there are also housing societies. So when people come together to form an apartment building, 10-storied building or 20-storied building or 30-storied building, where there are 20, 30, 40 families residing, those owners of the flats can create what is called a cooperative housing society, which is a type of society and governed by a different version of the Act. But again, the society acts for the good of the society. More recently, when the India Companies Act was formulated, there was a need felt to define a charitable company, a socially focused company. And therefore, the India Companies Act had a specific section, which was earlier called Section 25, now called Section 8, which provided the framework for a socially oriented company, which are called now commonly as Section 8 companies. So these are similar to a for-profit normal company. It allows the Section 8 companies to gather funds, do their activities with one proviso that they cannot give away the profits back to whoever has set up the company. To make the differences clear, I have put together, and you can see on the screen, a comparative table of the different kinds of legal structures: trusts, societies, Section 8 companies. As you can see, they're governed by slightly different laws. Some, especially the Section 8 companies, have more legal requirements in terms of reporting to the government what they are doing, in terms of filing income tax returns, in terms of being audited, because typically a Section 8 company can be a very large company and it can scale up because it can collect and grow aggressively. A trust may not be as large, as big, may not want to grow as fast or spread across the geography. And therefore, within the Trust Act, the requirements are easier, simpler, and societies are somewhere in between. The government structures, the governance structures, the control of these entities, the legal entities, are also slightly different, as you can see on the screen. As I've also said, because they get tax benefits, because the scales are different, Section 8 company can be quite big, dealing with large sums of money, whereas trusts may be slightly smaller, societies in between. The compliance requirements, the tax laws are slightly different. Having said all of that, now let's come to a very important concept, probably a unique concept, which is legally applicable in India. The basic concept, as Mr. Ratan Tata so well articulated, and this is actually from a government website. The link is below and you should go there to look it up. And as Mr. Tata said, every business also has a moral obligation to society, a social obligation, so to say. And in line with that spirit, the Government of India introduced a requirement for Indian companies or companies operating in India to spend part of their profits in what is called social activities. In essence, the law mandates, and this is called the CSR law, mandates that 2% of the net profits of the previous 3 years' average must be used for social good. And we'll see later that social good is also defined. And this is the responsibility of the highest management of the board of the company. And if you just go and research for yourself the CSR laws, you will find that there are very stringent requirements for profit-making companies to comply with the CSR laws, to implement the project and back to the government what they have done in terms of social responsibility. So what does social good mean? What can the CSR funds be used for? So the law itself also provides certain activities which are called Schedule 7 activities as part of the CSR law of the India Companies Act 2016. And there are about 12 or 15 activities. For example, doing projects to eradicate hunger or poverty. So this is an activity permissible by law, the CSR law, but it also supports the UN SDGs. Remember, the UN SDG 1 and 2 were about no poverty and zero hunger. You'll find that the other activities allowed by the CSR laws also support the SDGs. For example, promoting education, skill building, etc. Gender equality. And then if you go down the list, you'll see that activities which is good for the environment, good for the planet, as per the United Nations SDGs, are also deemed as permissible activities under the CSR law. So you can read that for yourself. Also supporting war veterans, Indian Army veterans, or the war widows, etc., is permissible. Moving on, you'll find that several other social activities are also permissible under the CSR law, which means that they can be funded by the 2% CSR spend that is mandated for profit-making companies. It includes training to promote sports. Also, the Prime Minister has a fund. It's a central fund, which is called the Prime Minister Fund, which is used for special occasions to solve social problems or environmental problems like floods or disaster relief, or when pandemic happened, when the COVID happened, these funds were used to help mitigate the risk and the damages of the pandemic. It also allows for rural development, slum development, etc. Importantly, if you are a scientist or a technology student in one of the government-funded institutes, the CSR laws allow for companies to make a donation to a central funded university like the IITs or the NIITs or IISc or a centrally funded incubator to promote research and development because it helps the country progress. This is just extracts, but you can look up the law yourself. So what's the impact of this law on India? And these numbers are from the government website. You'll see that about 25,000 companies have participated under the ambit of the law. They've collectively spent about 30,000 crores, close to 30,000 crores for doing social good. It's spread across 40 states and union territories. There are about 52,000 projects across 14 sectors, CSR sectors and domains. And this helps the government fulfill its responsibilities to India, to Indian societies. So this is actually the corporate sector pitching in to support the government in the development of India, to create a better India. Now, having understood the framework of social businesses, NGOs, etc., societies, trusts, Section 8 companies, having understood the frameworks, having understood the mission under United Nations SDGs, having had some idea of how India is progressing and how the CSR laws are coming into play, I encourage all of you to look around and get involved with a society, a trust, a Section 8 company, an NGO, a social business, any club, college, team which is doing social good. As I said, there could be hospitals, they could be schools, there could be just organizations doing teaching and skill building, etc. And I put on the screen a few names. There are thousands such organizations, some small, some big, some very big, doing social good across India. The biggest one would probably be the Tata Trust. Every of the big companies probably will have a foundation. Every rich Indian will probably do something for the good of India. And there are the ultra rich who would have set up family foundations or family offices to do social good. And you can see for yourself some of the names which have been doing good in India. So this is the end of the module. Thank you. Namaskar.